Hello friends, today we are going to discuss Renaissance political thought, Renaissance Indian political thought and its characteristics. We all know Renaissance is a concept of European political thought. In fact, Renaissance is a process that has revitalized the learning of Greek and Rome ideas of ancient civilization. That's called as Renaissance. Renaissance has brought a sense of scientific temper and spirit of inquiry among the minds of the people. Renaissance was a great success in European societies. Renaissance has laid down the foundation for the modern age, for the commencement of modern age in Europe. And Renaissance has its impact on philosophy, arts, literature, politics, and various other sectors of public life. So today we are going to discuss Renaissance in Indian political thought and its characteristics. Here we can see Mahatma Gandhi, Jawaharlal Nehru, Raja Ram Mohan Rai, and also of course a number of philosophers like Dayananda Saraswati, Mahatma Jyotiba Phule, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, Ram Manohar Lohia. So these are the great philosophers who have brought reform in the society, both in society and in political system. That's why they are called as socio-political philosophers. So Renaissance period has initiated a new thinking, new style of thinking in all sectors of public life, and political sector is also no exception. Even in political sector, so many thinkers have adopted the techniques of Renaissance in their philosophical ideas and gave a new orientation altogether in understanding the social realities. So in Indian context, the Indian political thought and the influence of Renaissance and its characteristics is the focus of our study today. Amala? Hello friends, today we are going to discuss the concept of Renaissance and its influence on Indian political thought, and we'll also be discussing about various characteristics of Renaissance in Indian political thought. As we all know, Renaissance is a process that has influenced the European societies in 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th and 17th centuries for 500 years, from 13th century to 17th century. It has influenced almost all sectors of public life, like literature, arts, politics, economy, society, and various other sectors. So Renaissance is nothing but rebirth of Greek and Roman ideas, rebirth of growing interest on reading and studying the ancient Greek and Roman ideas is called as Renaissance. So Renaissance has occurred in European societies in 13th, 14th centuries, and it has its impact till 17th century. So all over the world, Renaissance has penetrated into all the continents, and India is also not an exception. With the advent of Britishers in India, Renaissance has taken place in Indian society. It has influenced the Indian political thinking also. So today, our focus of our lesson is the Renaissance Indian political thought and its characteristics. So Renaissance is a phenomenon in European societies. Renaissance political thought commenced in 13th and 14th centuries, and it was in vogue till 17th century in Europe. In fact, Niccolo Machiavelli, an Italian thinker, is considered as the father of Renaissance thinking in political thought. He is the father of modern political thought. He is the father of Renaissance thought in European societies, in Western political traditions. So, till 17th century, Renaissance has its influence. Renaissance has influenced so many philosophers, from Niccolo Machiavelli to Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Hegel, and other philosophers. So these philosophers are called as the Renaissance thinkers in European or Western political theory. That means Renaissance as a political thought has commenced in 13th and 14th centuries, and it was in vogue till 17th century in Europe. And Renaissance means rebirth and revival of interest in the learning of ancient Greece and Rome. Here we can see the ancient Greece and Roman civilizational remnants. In fact, these are the two important civilizations in ancient world, ancient European civilizations that have influenced the learning patterns, the innovative practices, and various innovations in European societies. Renaissance means rebirth. So the ancient Greek and ancient Roman civilization and their ideas have, in course of time, are eclipsed. But during medieval time, only religion ruled the whole societies. As a result of religious fundamentalism and religious focus on all sectors of public life, people have lost their reasonableness, rationality. That's why Middle Ages were very often quoted as Dark Ages. Again in 13th century, when Turks captured Constantinople, the Renaissance started. So Renaissance means rebirth of Greek ideas, rebirth of Roman ideas, rebirth of revival of interest in the learning of ancient Greek and Roman ideas. This is called as Renaissance. Renaissance laid down the foundation for the modern age. It has shifted the focus from religious politics to secular politics. So, as an impact of Renaissance, politics and religion are separated. Politics and ethics are separated. So, the secular politics, the secular political thinking started commencing from Renaissance, and Renaissance as a process has laid down the foundation for modern age. Modern age can be defined as an age that separated religion and politics. So Renaissance started in 13th and 14th centuries, and it has influenced the political thinking of various philosophers. In these philosophers, for example, Niccolo Machiavelli, who have separated religion and politics, and these philosophical ideas have laid down the foundation for the modern age. And Renaissance process in Indian political thought was started in 17th and 18th centuries with the advent of Britishers in India. And Britishers came to India in 17th century, and they have consolidated themselves with annexations, conquers, and conquests, acquisitions. They have consolidated their empire, and they have also started English education in Indian society. So with the advent of British rule in India, Renaissance process was started. And Renaissance Indian political thought had some important political philosophers like Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Jyotiba Phule, Dayananda Saraswati, and we have Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, and various other philosophers, Arvind Ghosh. So these philosophers have revived the ancient glorification of Indian culture and society. So that's how the Renaissance in Indian political thought had Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Jyotiba Phule, and others as dynamic philosophers. Various factors contributed for the emergence of Renaissance thought in India. For example, the Britishers have introduced Western education in India. This Western education has facilitated the people to acquire the skills of scientific temper and spirit of inquiry. As a result of this, the Renaissance thought has emerged in the Indian society. So, different factors have emerged. They have contributed for the emergence of Renaissance thought in Indian society. Western and Indian conceptions of Renaissance have similarities and dissimilarities. In fact, the Western concept of Renaissance has its roots in 13th and 14th centuries itself. And it was there till 17th century. So that means it was a very long process of nearly 5 centuries. But Indian Renaissance started only in 17th century, much after the European Renaissance process. Of course, both the Indian conception of Renaissance and Western conception of Renaissance have both similarities and dissimilarities that we are going to discuss in course of our lecture. So in today's class, we have a lesson plan. First of all, we'll be discussing about the Renaissance meaning and nature. And after that, Renaissance political thought and Western tradition, how European societies have undergone the process of Renaissance is the second important aspect. And thirdly, Renaissance and its influence on Indian political thought, particularly Jyotiba Phule, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Dayananda Saraswati, Devendranath Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. So these are the first generation social reformers and very ardent supporters of nationalism in the Indian society, and they have vehemently opposed all the social evils. So Renaissance in Indian political thought has occurred from 17th century itself with the advent of Britishers. And we'll also make a brief survey of Renaissance political thinkers in India in course of our lecture as a fourth item. And lastly, we'll be making comparison and contrast, similarities and dissimilarities between Western conception of Renaissance and Indian tradition of Renaissance. So there is a lot of difference conceptually and also empirically, both theoretically and empirically. There is a lot of difference between Indian conception of Renaissance and Western conception of Renaissance. That will make it in course of our time. After that, we'll make a critical evaluation of the whole lesson. To start with, Renaissance meaning and nature. What is Renaissance? Renaissance is rebirth. It's a rebirth of ideas. The ideas which have died down, which have virtually eclipsed, which were gone to dark by virtue of several reasons. Those ideas of Greek and Roman civilizations. So they have reborn in the modern times. So Renaissance is rebirth of ancient Greek and Roman political ideas. This is the meaning of Renaissance. And Renaissance encouraged scientific temper and spirit of inquiry among the people. All the people have challenged the social evils. All the people have challenged the patterns of dominance. All the people have challenged the despotic rule of kings, absolutist kings. All the people have asserted their rights. All the people have actively participated in uprisings and revolutions as a result of Renaissance. That means Renaissance has brought a new thinking pattern among the minds of the people, which encouraged scientific temper and spirit of inquiry among the minds of the people. So this is the nature of Renaissance. Now we'll be discussing what are the important characteristics of Renaissance in the European political thought. In the European political thought, Renaissance has several meanings. As we have already seen this, in 13th and 14th centuries, Renaissance process was started, and it has influenced almost all the sectors of public life. It has influenced literature, it has influenced arts, it has influenced science, it has influenced politics, it has influenced economics and economy, it has influenced the society, it also influences the religion. So that means almost all public sectors, like sectors of public life, are influenced by the process of Renaissance. So people in political science, political philosophers, with the impact of Renaissance, demanded popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty means the sovereignty of the people, the sovereignty or the supreme power of the people. Supreme power of the people or their political system or their rights or their social privileges or their liberties and equalities. So that's how people are very assertive of their rights. So it has given rise to popular sovereignty. This is the first and foremost important aspect of Renaissance political thought. In fact, Jean Bodin, Hugo Grotius, Thomas Hobbes, and various other philosophers have advocated the idea of sovereignty, but of course in a different form. Popular sovereignty as a concept is given by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Jean-Jacques Rousseau has insisted that people are supreme and people are the rulers. There is no need of a king. That's why he supported popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty as a political concept has emerged during 15th and 16th centuries in European societies, and it was advocated and emphasized by various political thinkers. So the emergence of a new political thinker, new political idea called popular sovereignty, the rule of the people, the power of the people, the supreme power of the people called as sovereignty, popular sovereignty, is a new concept of Renaissance political thought. Secondly, Renaissance political thought has supported growing absolutism. It wanted an autonomy to the state from the religion. It wanted the influence of Pope must be declined and political system should be controlled by the king. King should be autonomous. King should be made supreme. King should be absolute. King need not be controlled by Pope. In fact, king should separate himself from religious moorings, religious pretexts, religious rituals, religious authorities of Holy Roman Empire. So that's why there are various instances of kings asserting their powers, absolute powers. That's called as growing absolutism. This has happened in Stuart kings of England, Tudor kings, Louis kings of France, and various other countries. So growing absolutism, absolute powers of the king or people, disregarding the influence of religion, is another important aspect of Renaissance. Thirdly, rights of people against despotic rule. When the king becomes despotic, when the king becomes repressive, then people have assertive of their rights against the king. People wanted to depose the king and want to establish a new king. So that's how the rights of the people against despotic rule. And this right of the people resulted in England Revolution, French Revolution, and revolution in various countries. So rights of people against despotic rule is another important aspect of European Renaissance thinking. And Renaissance political thought also has certain important characters like it resulted in popular uprisings and revolutions. When people have a new pattern of thinking with spirit of inquiry and scientific temper, people have questioned the despotism of the king. People have questioned the absolute rights of the king. People have questioned the repressive nature of the king, repressive nature of the state. That's how people wanted a new setup, a new governance, system of governance with the initiative of the people. That's why popular uprisings and revolutions have come between 15th century to 18th century. We have England Revolution. We have killing of Tudor kings and Stuart kings, Charles, by people. And likewise, there is Louis kings, which are killed by the people. So that means there was French Revolution, England Revolution, American Revolution occurred due to the impact of Renaissance on politics. In fact, Renaissance political thought has emphasized on popular uprisings and revolutions and intellectual contribution by various political philosophers belonging to the Renaissance period also resulted in popular uprisings and revolutions. There are so many philosophers behind the English Revolution, French Revolution, American Revolution, so on. And likewise, a rise of middle class against feudal lords. So there was a new class formed. This class is distant from either upper class or lower class. This is called middle class. Middle class constituted the industrial managers, industrial workers, industrial employees, merchants, traders, entrepreneurs. So these groups are called as the middle classes. So with the advent of industrial revolution, as a result of Renaissance, a new middle class has formed. And this middle class fought against their rights, against feudal lords. They fought for their rights against feudal lords. And these middle classes were responsible and instrumental in wiping out feudalism from European societies. So rise of middle classes against feudal lords is also another important aspect of Renaissance. And likewise, divine origin theory was replaced by social contract theory. In the medieval political thought and in ancient political thought, there were certain assumptive theories on the formation of state, on the origins of state. According to these theories, the state was created by God. The state was the creation of Almighty. With the divine intervention only, state has come into existence. And king is the representative of God. So by opposing the king, it is deemed that people are opposing the God. So king should not be opposed. Obedience to king is very much important for the people to get away from their evil forces. And it is considered as obedience to religion. So that's how divine origin theory was there in Middle Ages and ancient period. But this theory was replaced by social contract theory. According to social contract theory, there is no divine intervention in the creation of state. It is only the initiative of the people that state is created. State is created as a result of a contract among the people. People made an agreement among themselves. People made a contract among themselves. And as an agreement of a social contract, a contract among the people, the state come into work. So the age-old Renaissance, the age-old divine origin theory was replaced by social contract theory as an impact of Renaissance. This is an important aspect. And likewise, the shades of popular rule and democracy are sown in the European soil. In fact, people have sowed the seeds of democracy. Democracy means self-rule, home rule, self-rule. People wanted a political system created and controlled by people by themselves. That's called as democracy. Democracy for the people, of the people, and by the people. So, as an impact of Renaissance, people have sown the seeds for popular rule and democracy. And there are also political thinkers like John Locke, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and various other philosophers. They have contributed a lot for sowing the seeds of democracy in European societies. In fact, last great book, John Locke wrote a great book called Two Treatises on Civil Government. The great work of Two Treatises on Civil Government has initiated the process of giving natural rights to the people, and people have also realized the importance of having rights. And it made the people to assert against the king's despotism and claim their natural rights. So that's how the seeds of popular rule and democracy are also sown in European societies as a result of Renaissance. So these are all the characteristics of European Renaissance: popular sovereignty, the emergence of the concept of popular sovereignty, the emergence of growing absolutism, and rights of people against despotic rule, and Renaissance and popular uprisings and revolutions, rise in middle classes against the feudal lords, and the replacement of divine origin theory by social contract theory. And likewise, the seeds of popular rule and democracy, which were sown as a result of Renaissance thinking. So these are all some of the important characteristics of Renaissance thinking, and many philosophers have contributed themselves for the Renaissance thinking from 13th century to 18th century. So this is all happening in Europe. Now let us discuss Renaissance Indian political thought. Political thought, how it was influenced by Renaissance thinking and Indian political thought. And firstly, we can say Indian political thought, as a result of Renaissance, certain new philosophers like Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Dayananda Saraswati, Jyotiba Phule, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, Devendranath Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore. So these philosophers have come to, and all of them, with an exception of few, have emphasized on glorification of Indian past. Past means Indian ancient culture, Indian scriptures, and heritage. So India has a rich civilizational advantage. India has Vedas, Vedangas, Upanishads, and it has a history of the Indus Valley civilization. So these are all a rich heritage of Indian society. So the Renaissance thinkers wanted to glorify their Indian past, just as the European political philosophers glorified the European and the Greek and Roman political ideas. The Indian political thinkers have glorified the Indian ancient civilization, ancient culture, ancient scripts, ancient heritage. So there's a comparison between the European conception of Renaissance and Indian conception. Glorification of the ancient culture, ancient scripts, ancient heritage is one of the important aspects of Renaissance Indian political thought. Secondly, Indian political thought, particularly the Renaissance political thought, emphasized on social reform. Indian society suffered many problems with the social evils like untouchability, parda system, dowry system, female infanticide, sati, forced widowhood, child marriages, untouchability. So these are all the social evils plaguing the Indian society in 18th and 19th century particularly, all the times in general. But Indian political philosophers of this age, of 17th century, 18th century, and 19th century, particularly emphasized on the need to have social reform in the Indian society. We can see so many Samaj societies, Samajas, Brahma Samaj, Arya Samaj, Prarthana Samaj, Satsodhik Samaj, Divigyan Samaj. So all these Samaj movements emphasized on social reform. So social reform has become a buzzword in the Renaissance political thought of Indian society. This is the second important aspect. And thirdly, Renaissance political thinking has questioned the medieval dogma and superstitions, and it has challenged them. That means the medieval societies are very often referred as darkest societies, as people are more influenced by religion, religious blind faiths, religious irrationalism, religious rituality. So medieval dogmas, medieval superstitions were questioned and challenged by the Renaissance thinkers. So Indian Renaissance thinkers particularly have questioned the medieval dogma. For example, the medieval practices like sati, throwing the woman who has lost her husband onto the pyre of her husband's burning body. So that's how there's an evil practice like sati sahagaman, And likewise, there is also another practice like female infanticide. So these medieval practices were questioned and superstitions were challenged as a course of Renaissance in Indian society. So medieval dogma and superstitions are challenged in the Indian society as a result of Renaissance political thought. This is an important aspect. And of course, Renaissance also is a process of protest against social evils and inequalities in social and economic order. As I am telling you time and again, Indian society is plagued with so many social evils like the Parda system, dowry system, sati, child marriages, underage marriages, female infanticide, untouchability. So these are the various social evils that were plaguing the Indian society in 18th and 19th centuries. So Renaissance political thinkers have made a protest against these social evils. So in their political thinking, there is a definite call for building a new society devoid of these social evils. They wanted these social evils to be stopped and a new social order need to be built. And they have also reluctant in accepting the social inequalities. They have denied social inequalities and they wanted a just and equitable social order. And politically, they wanted an egalitarian society with liberty and equality to the people by providing them justice. So this is how it's a protest against social evils and inequalities in social and economic order of the society. Indian society, as we all know, is divided into various divisions. There is also religious orthodoxy, social orthodoxy in Indian society, with some castes are called as upper castes, some castes are called as middle castes, and some castes are called as lower castes. They are branded as different castes, and this has emanated from the Varna system, the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra Varnas. And these Varnas are again in turn divided themselves into various number of castes, hundreds of castes, thousands of subcastes. Eventually, these castes, subcastes, and Varnas have brought social evils and inequalities in the society. The dignity and self-respect of human being is very much compromised with the presence of these social inequalities. So an upper caste man has become the depository of the self-respect and dignity, and a lower caste man have to compromise his self-respect and dignity at the cost of even his life also. So that's how there is a glaring inequalities in the society between upper classes, lower classes, and middle classes. So these social inequalities in social order and economic order are creating a kind of an exploitative society in the society. So that's why the Renaissance Indian political thought made a protest against the social evils. It wanted these social inequalities should be wiped out, and also economic inequalities also should be wiped out. A just and equitable social economic order, social order and economic order need to be built. That was the call given by the Renaissance political thought. And likewise, it also made a protest against the social evils of the society. Likewise, Renaissance political thought has also given rise to English educated middle classes. It has given rise to middle classes. Most of them are English educated middle classes. All the upper classes in the society have sent their children to England and asked them to have a bar as their qualification. And all the foreign returned upper class, middle classes have become educated class in Indian society, and they started the reforming the society. They took the responsibility of reforming the society. So the rise of English educated middle class is also another important aspect of the impact of Renaissance on Indian society. And political thought has cleverly detected the rise of English educated middle classes. And even in European societies, we have seen the rise of middle classes. But the rise of middle class in European societies are attributed to the mercantilism, colonialism, industrial revolution, geographical discoveries, and various other factors. But in Indian context, the rise of English middle class, the rise of middle classes is attributed to the English education brought by the Britishers. So the rise of English educated middle classes is an important aspect of Renaissance political thought. In fact, Renaissance political thought has roamed all the English educated middle classes into the nationalist movement, and it deemed this class as an obligatory class that carry out the nationalism and national movement in Indian society. And national movement in Indian society was mostly carried by the middle classes, particularly the English educated middle classes, the lawyers, doctors, university professors, merchant class, trading classes, industrialist classes, entrepreneurial classes. So these are the different classes that have virtually carried out the nationalist movement in Indian society. So these classes, in fact, the very formation of middle class is facilitated by the English education of Britishers in India. The rise of English educated middle classes is also another important aspect of Renaissance political thought. And after that, the trends of nationalism and right to self-determination. The trends of nationalism and right to self-determination is also a notable point of Renaissance political thought. Renaissance political thought has asserted themselves of their nationalistic aspirations and brought very powerful nationalist movements in various countries. These nationalist movements have recognized the right to self-determination of the people, and people demanded political independence and political self-rule by their own native leaders in their political systems. So that's how the trends of nationalism and right to self-determination and people's realization for aspirations for national self-determination is an important notable point of Renaissance political thought. So Renaissance Indian political thought has seen the trends of nationalism and right to self-determination. So Indian Renaissance political thought has certain important characteristics. The first one is glorification of Indian past and ancient culture, scripts and heritage. This is one thing. And ancient culture like Vedas, Vedangas, Upanishads and various other scriptures are given importance and they are glorified. And Indian heritage was eulogized. So glorification of Indian past is the first and foremost important and distinct characteristic of Renaissance Indian political thought. Secondly, the Renaissance Indian political thought emphasized on social reform. It wanted the social evils to be wiped out and society should be built on egalitarian and equitable basis. And thirdly, the medieval dogma and superstitions were challenged by the people, and people have imbibed the qualities of the spirit of inquiry and scientific temper. So with spirit of inquiry and scientific temper, people have questioned the medieval dogma and superstitions. They have challenged them, and in place of them, scientific values, empirical values, and testable normative values have come into vogue. So middle-age dogmas, medieval dogmas and superstitions are very much challenged by the Renaissance political thought. And fourthly, all the social evils of Indian society and inequalities of social and economic order are protested by the Renaissance political thinkers. Renaissance political thought has made a protest against the social evils on the one hand and social inequalities and economic inequalities on the other hand. So there are glaring social inequalities in Indian society by virtue of the Varna system and caste system. And likewise, there are also glaring economic inequalities. We have the most prosperous sections, the wealthier sections, middle classes, middle income groups, and we have lower classes who suffer from poverty and destitution, who cannot afford to have 1 square meal a day. So they are called as destitutes and poorest of the poor people, poorer sections. That's how economically there are 3 sections emerged. Upper class are wealthier sections, middle classes, and lower class are poorer sections. So the Renaissance Indian political thought wanted these economic inequalities and exploitative nature of Indian society should be reconstructed, and a new society with egalitarian social order and economic equality should be built. So that's another important aspect. And after that, Renaissance has facilitated for the rise of English educated middle classes in Indian society. Rise of English educated middle classes due to the English education launched by the Britishers in Indian society. So this is one important notable character of Indian Renaissance political thought. Lastly, the trends of nationalism and right to self-determination. People have realized the need to have a self-realization, self-determination, determining their own nature of political system, their own system of governance, their own structure of government is called as the right to self-determination. And likewise, they have also fought for nationalism, and they have carried out powerful nationalist movements in various societies. Like in Indian society, we have the Indian National Congress of Moderates, Extremists, and Gandhian leaders. They have fought for political independence, and they have established powerful nationalist movements in India. And likewise, in many states, in many countries, nationalism and right to self-determination become the buzzwords of Renaissance political thinkers and political thought. So now let us make a brief survey of all the political thinkers, particularly the Renaissance political thinkers in India. First one is Raja Ram Mohan Rai, who laid down the foundation for social reform in India, has established a Brahma Samaj in 1828, followed by Dayananda Saraswati establishing Arya Samaj, followed by Prarthana Samaj, Satyashodak Samaj, Divigyan Samaj, and various other Samaj movements. So these Samaj movements have emphasized the need for social reform in Indian society. And they want to establish an egalitarian social order with social justice as the central idea in Indian society. And Raja Ram Mohan Rai is very particularly made an unrelenting effort in bringing social reform in Indian society. That's why he is very often quoted as the father of Indian Renaissance. Raja Ram Mohan Rai is well known for Renaissance, and he is known as the father of Indian Renaissance in India. And likewise, Dayananda Saraswati, and who has glorified the Indian past. He wanted the whole scriptures like Vedas, Vedangas, Upanishads, and various other scriptures are to be reread in the context of 19th century. And he encouraged the people to glorify the Indian past so that India can proudly claim itself as an Oriental society with Oriental knowledge. And thirdly, Jyotiba Phule, he wanted social egalitarianism, and he wanted the caste system should be wiped out, the untouchability should be wiped out, and there should be a need to rebuild the society with equality as the foundation. That's called a social egalitarianism. So these are the 3 important political philosophers of Indian society belonging to the Renaissance period in India. They are called as the Renaissance Indian political thinkers. Of course, there are so many other thinkers also there. And likewise, there are so many similarities and dissimilarities between Western and Indian tradition of Renaissance. First of all, if we take, there are two similarities between Indian tradition and Western tradition of Renaissance. Both of them are born out of medieval religious thinking. Medieval religious thinking, medieval fundamental religious thinking, medieval dogmas, medieval religious practices are the reasons for the emergence of Renaissance. In fact, these Renaissance ideas have come out as a result of medieval religious thinking. So they have emerged as an antithesis for the medieval religious thinking. They have opposed the medieval religious thinking and fundamentalist religious thinking, and they wanted a secular thinking. So Renaissance as a new conception, as a philosophical idea, has generated secular thinking. So conceptions of Renaissance have born out of medieval religious thinking. And secondly, both the Western tradition and Indian tradition have challenged the dogma and religious superstitions. Both Indian tradition of Renaissance and Western tradition of Renaissance have challenged the dogma, blind faiths, superstitions, particularly the religious superstitions, are challenged by both Indian tradition of Renaissance and Western tradition of Renaissance. Of course, there are also dissimilarities between Indian concept of Renaissance and Western concept of Renaissance. First of all, while the Indian traditions established social reform as its emphasis, Western tradition focused on political reform. So Indian society wanted social reform first and political reform later. It wanted to bring social reform. That's why Raja Ram Mohan Rai, Dayanand Saraswati, and other leaders, they wanted the society to be rebuilt with equality as the foundation and establish a social egalitarianism. So social reform was its emphasis. But whereas Western tradition, it only focused on political reform. It wanted the despotic rule of kings should be ended, and likewise the growing absolutism of the king should be ended, and people's rights to be accepted and they should be recognized, and these rights should be given the legal and constitutional status. So Western tradition focused on political reforms, and these political reforms resulted in uprisings and revolutions in various countries, like the England Revolution in 1668, French Revolution in 1789, 1776 American War of Independence, or the American Revolution. So this is how the Western tradition of Renaissance focused on political reform, whereas Indian tradition of political reform, Indian tradition of Renaissance emphasized on social reform. This is one difference. And secondly, while the Western traditions centered around absolutism and social contract, Indian tradition laid emphasis on nationalism. So Indian tradition of Renaissance has directly entered into nationalism, nationalist aspirations, nationalist movement, and self-rule, and various other things. Whereas Western traditions, they have centered around the absolutist nature of the state, absolutism of the king, and it wanted the king also need to be accountable to the people, and they have opposed absolutism, and they were assertive of the rights of the people. And it made a new thinking called social contract in explaining the origins of state. It replaced the age-old theory of the divine origin theory. So these are certain dissimilarities between Indian conception of Renaissance and Western conception of Renaissance. If we make a critical evaluation of both the Renaissance of Indian tradition and Western tradition, we can say that the Renaissance is a process that facilitated new thinking among the minds of the people. It encouraged the secular thinking. It wanted the religious dogmas, superstitions to be challenged by the people. This is one thing. Secondly, Renaissance process has facilitated the popular sovereignty and emergence of popular uprisings and revolutions in the European societies, and it laid emphasis on social reform, nationalism, right to self-determination in Indian society. And likewise, the Western tradition emphasized on the social contract theory. The Indian tradition emphasized on the nationalism and nationalistic aspirations, and a written constitution, a rigid constitution, a flexible constitution to suit to every section of Indian society. It wanted to rebuild the society with the state as a tool, with constitution as a tool. Constitution is a vehicle to transform the society. So this is how there are various differences, comparisons and contrasts, similarities and dissimilarities between Western tradition of Renaissance and Indian tradition of Renaissance. But all in all, Renaissance is a concept, is a political idea that has generated scientific temper and spirit of inquiry among the people, and that has an impact on various sectors of public life like economy, politics, society, art, literature, medicine, science, and various other things. So Renaissance has its impact, and with particularly the Indian Renaissance thought has brought a new slogan to the Indian society called social reform and social justice. While Raja Rammohan Rai represented social reform, Jyotiba Phule represented social justice. So this is how the Renaissance movement has brought new style of politics and new style of political thinking. Thank you very much, friends. Thank you.